Good morning. I am the Reverend Teri Schwartz. Welcome to our online worship service here at the First Unitarian Church of Chicago. It is good to be together, especially right now. This is not the service we expected to lead. Yesterday, just before noon, our hearts and spirits told us we must speak truth and witness to what is unfolding in our country right now and what has unfolded for the last 400 years. The world demands that we stop. The world demands that we see. The world demands that we grieve. The world demands that we speak. The world demands that we act. The murder of George Floyd, the long-deferred arrest of Ahmaud Arbery's murderers, the weaponized power of white privilege aimed pointedly and perilously at Christian Cooper. Yet again, we cannot avert our gaze from the racism and white supremacy embedded in the foundation and fabric of our country. Chicago was under curfew last night. Minneapolis burning. Across the country, people are rising up. The widening circle of protest is a call to us, a reminder that silence is complicity. We will not remain silent. Black lives matter. We gather as a church to mourn and to celebrate. Today, we gather to mourn. We gather as a church to make space. We make space in the ceaseless flow of time. We make space apart from our daily responsibilities. We make space for grief, anger, isolation, hopelessness. We gather as a church to observe silence and to speak truth. Today, we gather to do both. We gather as a church to be a moral voice in the public square, be that on sidewalks or websites. And today we face the brutal reality of racial injustice and violence. We gather as a church because we believe in transformation, in alchemy of spirit and mind, that mourning can turn into joy, anger into action, hopelessness into resolve, isolation into community. In naming the reality of our broken nation, the reality of love and solidarity can heal. We are not here to give the answers, to resolve anything or everything, to tie it together nor to make sense, nor to make us collectively feel good or to make us individually feel good. We're here to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. We gather for this work because this is who we are.
We gather for this work because this is who we are, all of us. Here at the First Unitarian Church of Chicago, we are a Unitarian Universalist congregation. We're a community of children and youth and adults. We're a people of many beliefs and traditions and understandings, and what unites us isn't the list of things we believe, but the values that we share, the mission that we share to grow our souls and to heal the world. Whether you're joining us online for the very first time, or whether you've walked the stones of this church 1,000 times before, you are welcome here. You belong here in this hour. Whether you believe in God some of the time, or all of the time, or none of the time, you're welcome here. You belong here. So do we. No matter how much money's in your pocket, no matter if you have a PhD or a GED or no degree, you're welcome here. You belong here. So do we. We're a people of many races and many beliefs. We're a people of many genders and sexual orientations. All of you is sacred. All of you is welcome. You belong here.
All of you is sacred. All of you is welcome. You belong here. You belong here. We need to grieve on our own, and we need to grieve together. The murders of Black people, the white threats against Black people, the uprising in Minneapolis. Throughout today's service, you can interact with one another throughout the comments section. Simply log into your YouTube account or create a new YouTube account to leave comments, reactions, and to leave prayer requests. And the prelude. I invite you now to be present to this moment as we enter into our service.
Each week we covenant with each other in this congregation. We covenant with each other. I'll lead you in it in just a moment, but a covenant means we make promises to each other about how we're going to be in the world, who we're going to be in the world. We promise each other what we're about and how we're going to do it. And some weeks, the words of that covenant are comfortable, nice platitudes, and some weeks we don't think too much about them, and some weeks our covenant is an uncomfortable call that we are falling short of. We say, love is the spirit of this church and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace. That doesn't mean the absence of conflict merely, but the presence of justice. That's what peace really is. Peace, dwelling together in peace, it doesn't mean mere politeness. Peace does not mean tolerance of intolerance. Peace means justice. Peace is not about comfort. Peace is not about contentment. Peace is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. That's the promise we're making to each other, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love. To seek the truth in love, not to find the truth definitively, to seek the truth in love, not to find one singular, exact, precise, defining belief about the nature of race or racism or white supremacy. We don't gather to find the right analysis that gets it exactly correct perfectly. We don't gather so that we all can use exactly the same vocabulary to talk about the same things. In the end, that practice, that work, that seeking all to get it right is just about me or you. It's not about us. We seek the truth in love. That doesn't mean we wait to do anything in the world until we've got it all. Love means tough love, too. It means saying what is difficult and true. It means moving forward all together. It means calling out what isn't true, to seek the truth in love and to help one another, Our loyalty as human beings is to humanity. Our loyalty as members of this congregation is not merely to the other members of this congregation, is not merely to the people watching this video, is not to the people who gather physically in the church, is not to our block, our neighborhood, our city, or our nation. Our loyalty is to humanity. It's to the living itself. That means we're called, each of us and all of us, to help one another. The task is enormous and unending. The promises we make are promises we will fall short of. And nonetheless, we covenant each week to them. I light our chalice this week. Simple flame. For those promises that we make, that commitment we make that pulls us out of and beyond ourselves. Will you join me in saying together the words of our covenant? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Friends, I invite you in the chat to warmly greet those who've gathered together this morning, remembering that the chat is public. Friends, will you take a breath with me? And another. I invite you into a spirit of prayer and meditation, to be grounded where you are, to be where you are, to be here now. Our words for meditation are from my colleague, Kate Tucker, called Dear Mr. Floyd. Dear Mr. Floyd, in pandemic times we learned that breath is everything. Look what we'll risk to keep it flowing in and out of our lungs, to feel it cool the nostrils, to feel the breastbone rise, to trust how it finds its way and feeds the blood. In pandemic times, we see how the world goes to work for a simple breath, giving up livelihoods, bringing children home from school to protect this elementary act, sees the nurses in shields like warriors, sees mask makers at their sewing machines intent over scraps of fabric, sees factories retool to make machines that push air through our windpipes so we can sing the song of life, sees distilleries turn spirits into sanitizer to make our hands clean, but our hands are not clean, Mr. Floyd, because of the other virus, the contaminant which is our pre-existing condition and causes us to step away from each other for centuries. Now your town is on fire, and you lie still on the pavement. See how our tears fall on our masks. See how our masks fall from our faces. See the fabric unravel, Mr. Floyd. Rise, please rise like the smoke. Do not refuse to haunt us. Do not refuse to haunt us. Or how will we remember what we learn and forget? Breath is not cheap. Will you take a breath with me? And another. Friends, we don't walk through this life alone. We don't have to. We share with each other the joys and the sorrows of our days. We share with each other the fears and anxieties of our livings. We enter into this moment and take off all our masks, trusting our lives into the common care of each other. I invite you in the chat to share the names of those you wish to lift up in the love of this community. I invite you to share your joy and your sorrow alike. I invite you not to go it alone.
me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, I'll comfort you. Comfort me, oh my soul.
What is there new to say that has not already been said? What were we not already told by the murders of Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland? What's the word that hasn't yet been spoken? We lived in Minneapolis, Teri and I, when our kids were small. For 3 years, we lived around the corner from the intersection where Floyd George was murdered on Monday. Every workday, I got on the number 5 bus right there, 38th and Chicago in Minneapolis. I know that intersection. I know that convenience store. I know that gas station. I know the real estate ads on the bus stop benches. Our house was around the corner. Our house was around the corner, and we never lived in the Minneapolis where Floyd George was murdered. My black neighbors and I lived on the same block, but we did not live in the same city. That's Chicago too. My black neighbors and I live in the same building, and we do not live in the same city. Minneapolis is America. Chicago is America. In Hyde Park, in Beverly, in a scattering of other neighborhoods around Chicago and around the country, good, liberal, progressive white folks talk about integration, but we do not yet live in the same country as our black neighbors. When I lived in South Minneapolis, the police were there to protect people who looked like me from people who looked like them. Here's the number of times I got hassled by a cop in Minneapolis. 0. In 7 years. 0. I mean, getting off the bus at 38th in Chicago at midnight, and the patrol cars never even slowed down. I mean, rolling through stop signs in my own car in front of the cops who didn't even look up to shake their head at me. I mean, jaywalking. Downtown, Nicollet Mall, the cops call out 2 black men and didn't even notice me not break stride across the street. Here's the number of times I got hassled by a cop in Minneapolis. 0. The rules for white America and the rules for black America are not the same. I live 3 blocks from where Floyd George was murdered. I waited for the bus on the patch of concrete where he died. And he and I never lived in the same city. What is the word for kind expressions of sympathy with no action? What's the word when you acknowledge the hurt and the pain is real and do nothing about it? What's the word when your answer to a murder is to show your resume of who you've supported, and when we Unitarian Universalists have a long history of fighting for racial justice, and we Unitarian Universalists have an even longer history of shaking our heads sadly and wiping our hands clean from the blood that is on them. God knows I detest slavery, wrote the Unitarian president, Millard Fillmore. God knows I detest slavery, but we must endure it and give it such protection as is guaranteed by the Constitution till we can get rid of it. He's one of us. He is deep in the long, progressive tradition of a heart in the right place. A person who cared, who wept surely, and worried, and did nothing. In his last breaths, Floyd George said, "My stomach hurts. My neck hurts. Everything hurts. I need some water or something, please. Please, I can't breathe, officer. I can't breathe. They're gonna kill me." And they did. Will we, too, do nothing? Will we, too, shake our heads and wash our hands? Will we, too, take our place in the long history and tradition of good progressives who shook their heads and walked past the Samaritan dying in front of us? Will we do nothing?
Will we too do nothing? We are in the midst of a pandemic, of a contagious and often deadly virus that cuts off the breath, that isolates and kills. And it kills people of color disproportionately because of another virus. We have been in an epidemic, a virus of white supremacy, for 400 years. Our country was founded on land theft, rape, and slavery. This virus is even more contagious and deadly and is transmitted through generations. Tweets, threats, state-sanctioned violence that cuts off the breath, that isolates, that kills people of color. And when people of color stand up, they are condemned to scrutiny condemnation, arrest, and often condemned to death. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev blew up the Boston Marathon. James Holmes shot up a Colorado theater. Dylan Roof committed a terrorist attack at a Charleston church, coldly executing 9 Black people as they worshiped. Each of these killers was safely taken into custody. In 2018, Philadelphia Eagles fans tore up their city, looting, flipping cars, and starting fires after a Super Bowl win. Trump did not threaten them. Shall we talk about looting? Looting is the theft of native lands. Looting is what's inside the Oriental Institute down the street. Looting is billionaire wealth growing 15% just since the beginning of the pandemic. In the fierce unrest and in our quiet sorrow, what words then do we speak? What then shall we do? There are some things that aren't helpful. They are seductive diversions at best, idolatry at worst. Shall we argue more over the right name by which to call a racist system of white supremacy? Shall we make a motion? Shall we seek salvation by right analysis? Shall we seek redemption by committee meeting? Shall we proclaim our innocence? Proclaim our expertise? Shall we disavow broken windows instead of broken bodies? Shall we change the channel? Shall we repeat again the old platitudes? We say, we hear, I'm so sad. I majored in Black Studies. I took a class on anti-racism. I fought in the Civil Rights Movement. Each of these statements starts with the same word, I. They do not address systemic racism and white supremacy, nor the personal actions that led to racist violence. They do not focus on the person who experienced the violence. They do not focus on the victims of murder. They do not focus on the families of those who were murdered. They do not focus on the experiences and discrimination and fear that Black and brown people face every single day. They do not speak of the woman who is afraid when her husband leaves the house for work. They do not speak of the child who is afraid when their father leaves the house to jog. They do not speak of the teenager who is afraid to go to the park, the child who is afraid to play. Feminist writer and activist Katie Anthony says we could say this instead. I'm sorry. I see you. It's awful. Does that feel insufficient? She asks. It's because it is. But we don't have to stop there. Neighbors in Minneapolis lined up grocery bags on the street for anyone who needs them. People across the country joined in protest. Minneapolis and New York City bus drivers refused to transport protesters to jail to ensure their labor was not used to shut down calls for justice. Oh, what then shall we do? Fight for criminal justice reform. Fight for income inequality. Fight for universal health care. Fight for free education. Fight for higher taxes on the 1%. Fight for all the things that would make rioting unnecessary. We covenant that love is the spirit of this church. That is tough love. Love that acts. Love that calls one another to be accountable. We say service is our prayer. This is our great covenant. To dwell together in peace. No justice, no peace. Seek justice. To seek the truth in love. Truth about ourselves. Truth in the news. Truth in history. In love, a tough love, a love of fierce unrest. And to help one another we covenant, and by one another at our best, we mean not merely our friends nor social clubs, but also those outside of our kin, outside of our comfort, outside of our privilege, outside of our church walls. And then, justice shall roll on like a river, and righteousness an ever-flowing stream. May it be so, and amen.
I am worn, I am tired, in my quiet sorrow. Hopelessness will not let me be. Help me. I won't speak of this ache inside. Light eludes me in the silence of my heart. I'm praying.